We are really thrilled to have this topic of the Stiletto Network. This is Pamela Ryckman, and Daphne is going to interview her. But Daphne, as only Daphne can do, met Pamela at a poker game. Is that right? So this is very much, in fact, part of what this story is all about. So I read this book on a long airplane flight recently and really loved it. Pam, congratulations on a great book. And I especially love the tagline, which is inside the women's power circles that are changing the face of business, which I think we all agree. Someone did say to me recently that we could also call the title of this morning's session the Stiletto Network meets the Pumps and Flats Network. I think we have two or three of our entrepreneurs with us today. So first of all, we have Eloise Bune right here with gracious Eloise. So thank you for coming. We thought they would enjoy this. Sarah Inline is here. Hi, Sarah. Welcome. And Sarah is with Sweet Riot. And then I thought I heard that Julia Pim was coming. Julia Pimsler is coming.
She's trying to come.
She's trying to come. So as many of you know, thank you. So as many of you know, Julia is with Little Pim. So I'm going to turn this over to Daphne, who's going to take it from here. Thank you and welcome, Pam.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Pam, for coming today. It's this dismal, whatever, so soggy New York day. Anyway, so yes, Pam and I met at a poker party. I really don't play poker, I don't have to play poker, but it was a party that Heidi Messer hosted, and it was the second party like that, which was really a social setting in which women could meet one another and do something fun together, and yet make all sorts of contacts and really leverage that sort of serendipitous set of connections that we all have, and to sort of bring people together in a group and see what would happen. So one of the things that happened was Pam was there, and I thought that given that we are not a stiletto network, but a powerful network of women who actually very much are a testament to the thesis of this book, that it would be great to have Pam here today. So Pam, would you, I think for starters, for those people who haven't read the book, sort of give us a little bit about the book and what it's about and all that?
Absolutely. I'm going to start off by saying something pretty bold, which is that I am pretty sure that the next decade is going to see an explosion of female wealth and power. And that is why I haven't slept in 3 years. Because I'm a journalist, I write freelance mostly for the New York Times, and I was researching a story a couple of years ago and I had a hunch. I thought something different was happening in the world, and the last 3 years have been my effort to figure it out. To figure out what's happening among women of all different generations, how they're coming together, how and why money is changing hands, and why that's going to change the world, because it is. So Stiletto networks, what are they? I have found groups of women meeting for dinner and in salons and co-working groups and networking circles in every major city in the US. Most of them have no more than 10 women, but in aggregate they number in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of women nationwide, and a lot of them have funny names. They are the Babes in Boyland, and the Chicks in Charge, and the Vault, and sometimes even, and this is controversial, the Power Bitches, and the Brazen Hussies. And this one always brings the house down, it's sluts, successful ladies under tremendous stress. And these are all groups, it's interesting, because I found these groups among women in all industries and in all age groups. So it's happening at the very senior executive level, the C-suite. It's happening among aspiring millennials, and it's happening among moms launching businesses in their basements. So I started to see a pattern everywhere. Women doing the same thing at the same moment in history, and not realizing that all these other women were doing the same. And so I went about following the money. I've charted billions of dollars of transactions and corporate board seats attained and companies founded and funded, all as a result of these little groups of 10. So to give you an idea of what some of the women have done, because I know we're all business women in the room, they've created the most downloaded app in the history of Warner Brothers. They have overseen the largest high-yield bond offering of 2010. They've joined the founding team of one of the fastest growing startups in US history, and they've created the single most successful fundraising pilot in the history of the Red Cross, all as a result of these genuine female friendships, which is why I sort of jokingly tell everybody it's a love story disguised as a business story.
Right. So one of the things that I think in reading the book comes up pretty quickly is just the idea that is there sort of a generational issue here, and how, again, given that we're women who wear flats more than stilettos, and as we were talking about before, for me the word stiletto has certain kind of old association, I mean, that are reflective of my generation, and when, you know, that was, what did you say, how did you describe it so nicely?
A little tardy.
A little tardy, right. So, and so, you know, that's kind of it's a metaphor for a difference. So I'd be interested in hearing from you how, in your research and what you saw out there, you saw, are there differences in how women are handling this, given generational, you know, experience and history?
Well, what was interesting is this story began, like I said, with a hunch, and I attended a conference actually where I met Stephanie Hanbury-Brown. Interestingly, I sat next to her. This was a couple of years ago. I went to a conference, I covered it for the New York Times. It was 50 of some of the nation's most high-powered women. It was an effort to bring 25 women on the East Coast to meet and learn from their Silicon Valley counterparts. And where this started, so these were all sort of very senior executive women, mostly, you know, off from their 40s to their 60s. And what was in, and this is kind of controversial actually, but I walked into a room and this started with a hunch. Because before becoming a journalist, I worked in management consulting and in finance. And I walked into a room of, again, 50 of the nation's most high-powered women, and they were dressed in dresses, and many of them were wearing stilettos, and many of them had long hair, and they looked truly feminine. And I know that that's sort of a hard thing to say, but I think historically, and I felt the pressure when I first started out, you know, working in finance, historically I think to succeed, women believed, and it was often true, that they had to dress and talk and act like men. And when I walked into this room, it was honestly the keen visuals that set me off, that something was changing. Because, and then I had my anthropologist hat on, because I was watching all these incredibly successful, very senior women interacting in what would be a stereotypically very feminine way. They were clasping hands and they were hugging each other. It was the same thing that everybody was doing when they walked into this room. It was so normal and natural and comfortable. And so it really started with me trying to figure out what was enabling all of these incredible women to succeed but still stay so comfortable in their own skin. And when it came down to it, a lot of them attributed that level of comfort and that ability to sort of dress and act and talk the way they wanted to other women giving them the courage and confidence to do it. So it actually started with a group of you know, the sort of elder set, not with the younger set. And then the rest of the story was me trying to figure out how the younger women fit in and why this, you know, none of these women ever talked about it as the next stage of the women's movement, but in fact, that's what we're really seeing.
Yeah.
And that's seeing the generations come together as well.
Right. So I think that that's a really important insight, that it's now, I mean, I think that the notion that social change can happen through business, as it were, and the way women do business is different than the way men do business. So and certainly that's a thesis here in this room, is that there is social change that could be affected through business decisions and supporting women to make. So could you talk about more about sort of your own experience of writing the book? Because I thought one of the things that's so compelling is how the book itself is a testament to the thesis of the book.
Yes. That's absolutely true. And I feel kind of hokey when I say this, but this is the story that completely changed my life. And it's taken my career in a completely new and exciting direction because I felt the wind at my back, because I had all these incredible women supporting me. And by the way, I sort of think it's a joke because I work at home in my sweatpants and sneakers. So I am not out in the world wearing stilettos every day. I'm a writer. So, yeah, but in any case, this started at this conference, and I met a semiconductor CEO in her 50s who mentioned her dinner group. And I said, who's in your dinner group? And she said, oh, I won in the late 90s. It was me and Meg Whitman when she was running eBay, and Joy Covey when she was CFO of Amazon, Dana Evan when she was CFO of VeriSign, Kim Palazzi, this whole group of hitters. They were called the Babes in Boyland. And this is Penny Hersher, who she's the CEO of First right now. And so I met her, and I told her, I was like, I have a feeling that something's changing. And then I met another woman at the conference, and I said, I have a feeling that something's, but I didn't have an established book contract, and I certainly didn't even have an article at that point. All I had was a hunch. And through, say, meeting 5 different women, they said, you know, you're smart and you ask good questions, we believe in you. let me introduce you to my friends. But their friends were, I mean, I'm a journalist, I know how hard it is to land interviews with CEOs because they're ensconced behind gatekeepers and walls of PR. They want to know exactly what you want and when you want it, and they don't have any time. So these women, these first sort of 5, 6 women who got on board, started introducing me to their friends, giving me their friends' personal cell phones and email addresses, connecting us, and those people responded immediately because I'd come through a trusted source. And so I started to see, not only see but live, how all of these women were advocating on each other's behalf because they were genuinely doing it for me. And so I joke around that I've been in gratitude orbit for the last 3 years. I just am like, oh, thank you, yes, I'll do anything. Like, I'll take any meeting, I'll say yes to any random connection because they've been so fortuitous. And so the book was built really on these networks, among these women saying, you know what, yeah, I have, and then when I started to figure out that it was based in these groups, they would welcome me and say, yeah, come sit in with us. And interestingly, I mean, as a journalist, you can say, like, you know, that sometimes it's dicey to get too close with your sources, but I often got really controversial material that people don't say on the record ever. People talking about really what their lives were like. You know, women in their 60s saying, I never put up a picture of my kid, ever. You know, I pretended my kids didn't exist, of course I love them. And, you know, but all of this sort of really meaty stuff that's hard to talk about, women talked about because I was so grateful that they brought me in and trusted me. And then when it came time for press, you know, I mean, I got 100 rejections on my book proposal. I mean, I was literally my agent's biggest loser. I could not sell this book because people were saying, who is she? She's nobody. Even if she writes for the Times, like, big deal, what's your clout score? And so, and these women kept saying to me, I mean, it was pretty low. You know, 2 years ago at the holiday time, I got my 27th rejection or something. I was like, oh, I'm the worst. I'm the weak link. All these incredibly amazing people believed in me, and I am so awful. I can't even sell this. And they kept just saying, no, you can do this. Don't stop. We believe in you. And then, when it came time for press, because in the last couple of weeks I've gotten some great press. How did the press happen? Because all these women said, oh, I know Deirdre Bolton at Bloomberg, or here's connecting me with Rosanna Scotto personally. This is, I mean, this entire story is a testament to the value of its thesis, that these networks change individual lives like mine, but in aggregate they're completely changing the world. I mean, I really could not be more grateful.
So talk more about that, how you think they're changing the world, I mean, at scale. So one of the things I like about the book is that it's really very anecdotal. And you sort of get to know these women, you get to know individuals, you get to know groups and how they're operating. And I would like you to also talk a little bit about sort of if there's kind of a roadmap that you think in terms of how these networks happen. But at scale, how do you feel that this has really changed things and the direction it's taken?
Well, it's interesting because Heidi Roizen, who is many of you probably know her or know of her, she is a trailblazing entrepreneur, early Microsoft employee in Silicon Valley. And she said something really interesting in the book. She said, you know, because we were talking about her level of comfort, you know, that she can wear, she knows how to wear the business suit, but she can also wear, you know, she does a lot of business, you know, hiking in flip-flops or, you know, walking around in her sweatpants. And she said, you know, it's not about the shoes you wear, it's not about what you wear, it's really about who you are. And in Silicon Valley, I think they're a bit ahead of us in figuring out that, you know, in the meritocracy, and figuring out that, you know, you can do business and you can look all different ways. But she said, we have to find a way to succeed as women, because if we're always trying to be something we're not, we'll be at a disadvantage. She said, you know, guys are just focusing on the work. Someone else is just focusing on the work. You're focusing on what you look like or how you're talking. And I think that was a really interesting part of this, because what I was seeing at that initial conference was women really feeling comfortable in their own skin. And not worrying that if they mentioned their kids and mentioned their, you know, or said something like, I love, what a beautiful jacket, that was going to be perceived as unprofessional. In some ways, you know, where guys might fall back on sports, this was our social currency. It's what women do. But now it's sort of infiltrated the workforce in a way that is acceptable. And so women can just focus on the work. They're not focusing on trying to be somebody that they're not. So that's one way that I think it's changing the world, because I think when you are, you know, you're just going to be a more productive employee in that case. But the other ways is that, you know, this story isn't confined to business necessarily. I've also charted unprecedented amounts of self-made women's wealth, channeled toward nonprofits that benefit women and girls, and toward political candidates that represent our interests. So I think it really becomes a story, a global social change story. And I think what's one of the most interesting things for women in this room, actually, is the way that the generations are coming together. Never before have we had this exact formula in history, where there are enough women across a variety of industries. If you still look, in a vertical, if you look at a single industry, you're not going to maybe find enough women, enough women at the top, enough successful women. But if you throw the net wider and you look horizontally across industry groups, there actually really are. And suddenly, at this moment in history, what I found, well, let me take a step back for a second. Most of the groups I found were cross-industry. And that was really interesting to me, so I tried to figure out why that was the case. At the same time I was trying to figure out why these groups were cross-industry, I was wondering why women had historically gotten such a bad rap in the workforce. Why we were backstabbers and why we were... And what I found was that historically there was really only room for one token woman at the top of any department, if not company or entire industry. So really a lot of these groups were, the ones that came about 10, 20 years ago, were formed for friendship, camaraderie, and commiseration. How do you deal with these issues? I'm the first one to have a baby. And so, but what's happened over time is that these women who started their groups 10, 20 years ago are so tight and know each other so deeply. And now what we're seeing is for the first time in history, women are capitalizing on, they're seeing a monetary return on time invested with their girlfriends. They're capitalizing on these connections and merging business and friendship the way that guys have always done. And so all of those sort of feminine things that would have been a disadvantage previously are now an advantage because they're allowing women to connect in such a natural way. So these groups are, across the top, women are investing together. There's tons of money moving around. And, like I was starting to say, the generations are coming together. So women at the top have the money. At the same time I was finding all these groups at the senior executive level, I was walking into rooms full of young female entrepreneurs, and they were partying like mad, and their parties were called Lady Business and the Calliope Group. And, but they, without even realizing they were mirroring their corporate executive elders, they're doing the same thing. They're building these companies and turning to each other and saying, oh my gosh, I don't have the resources to hire a CMO. And somebody says, neither do I, but maybe we can share. Or, oh, I don't know enough JavaScript, but can you teach me? Oh yeah, I know the guy. They've become, unwittingly, each other's strategic advisors. So there's money moving among all of these women, and then there's money moving among all of these women because they're investing together. And increasingly what you find is behind all these young female entrepreneurs, there is a corporate senior executive elder who has said, I'm a pre-IPO partner at Goldman. The needle hasn't moved as quickly as I'd like. Maybe I can't control who makes a partner at Goldman Sachs, but I can find the dynamo and invest in her, spin my platinum Rolodex on her behalf, which is exactly what you guys are all doing right now, and slingshot her to visibility. I'm going to make, these women are thinking about legacy. I'm going to make my change in the world. So it's business, it's politics, it's philanthropy, it's all of these women in all different generations coming together and really changing the world. Wow. Sorry, I go on.
No,
I'm excited about it.
So again, I think the question of a roadmap, are you, so sort of is the end game to sort of, find a way, talk about that. That's kind of what
the purpose of the book, when I started to find this, I got so excited about it. I was like, this, because all these women were talking about this, like this was like secret sauce. They thought that they were alone in assembling these clusters of like-minded ladies. And again, they were cross-industry, so they didn't really have an intent. They weren't trying to shake each other down for their connections. They were really meeting because, Daphne and I are close friends, and I say to her, oh my gosh, you're gonna love this, you just have to meet her, you guys are gonna get along. But suddenly they get along, and one woman realizes that she has the skills that Daphne needs to do whatever, take her business forward. Or Daphne said, you know what, a friend of mine is looking for a strategic collaboration. I kind of think you guys will get along. You should talk. And that's how the magic happens. It's very informally. But I did try to distill and figure out what are the tips for success. What's the through line? So what I found is, again, these groups have diversity. So 10 seems to be the magic number, for whatever reason, because in groups of 10, you can create an environment where there's true intimacy, because there's real bonds of trust and loyalty at the heart of these groups. So it's small enough that you really get to know all the different members, but large enough that you get lots of different viewpoints from lots of different industries. And you think about it, if you're looking for a job or trying to find a partner or trying to find an investor, 10 heads looking are so much better than one. So the first thing is think about diversity, bring people together from different spheres, because the idea is to expand your horizons, your spheres of influence. But then, it's a fine line, because if you really want those bonds of loyalty and trust to gel, you also need it to be rooted in shared experience. So often I found the groups have people from different industries, but they're at the same level of experience, it's really peer-to-peer, or same age. So they're sort of going through things at the same time. When somebody has a problem or an issue, they say, oh my gosh, I've been there, this is how I dealt with the same thing. Because, and we were talking about this, and I heard this, a lot of women said this in the book. Some of the larger women's organizations that you have to be careful of is that there are too few women at the top and all these women who want to be mentored at the bottom. So how do you get real value? Well, the value in these small groups is the incredible filter. Because everybody is filtered for values and ethics. You're going to love her. She's a good girl. She's a wonderful woman. Who cares what she wears on her feet? So it's that. And then, another one is, and I think this won't be any news to the women in this room, but I think I say in the book, have courage, give courage. I think what I've seen in these groups of women is a lot of the women were not, and this is why I keep saying to everyone, anyone can do this, because I found it at all levels. And what these women have done for each other, a lot of them were not wealthy or that accomplished when they started the groups, but they credit these groups with really giving them the kick in the pants and facilitating their success, saying, no, get out of that job, you hate it, you're miserable, and start your company, you can do it, we'll find you your first 5 clients, we'll help you get this off the ground. So it's really rooted in, in profound, deep friendship, giving courage. It's a support system. It's strategic advisors. People talk about your advisory board. This is an advisory board, but also the advisory board of your best friends, who are equally smart.
So I guess I'm still challenged by, as I said to you before, my new line is men sell their Rolodexes. Sorry, men sell their Rolodexes, and women share their contacts. And so I'm interested in whether there's some, kind of a DNA thing that makes us, is it that we sort of understand that actually sort of a collaborative, open approach, actually, we're not taking a short-term view and see some longer term? Is it because our lives are so melded, our personal, our professional, our emotional? But I'm still, as I was reading the book, I was just kind of, okay, so what is, I see the behavior, but I'm interested in what's kind of the driver. And
I think it's all of those things. As I was saying before, this was really interesting. As I was trying to figure out why historically women got such a bad rap in the workforce, I was looking at the way that women behave. I have little kids, right? I know how it works in every other area of life. It's the carpool, it's the Girl Scouts, it's the PTA. Women have been historically and stereotypically highly collaborative in all of our other endeavors. So why was it that women weren't that way in the business world? And so what I'm seeing is women's inherent nature, inherent collaboration, infiltrating the business world as well. This is kind of what we do. It works for us. It's easy, it's natural, it's normal. Now it's suddenly working for us here because, again, some of it has to do with critical mass. In the book, I refer to it as the confluence of evolution and revolution. The evolution is that finally, after 40 years of women in the workforce, there are enough women in positions of power to actually be able to do something, to add value for each other across a variety of industries. But the revolution part is why that collaboration is valuable. And a lot of that has to do with the technological revolution that's going on. So if you look at, the women are the primary users of all social media. They have more friends, they have more, we're doing all of that sharing. It's a natural progression of everything that we do offline, moving online as well, and being completely fast-forwarded. And so I think a lot of what's happening is that women's skills, for the first time in history, these inherent collaborative skills are becoming valuable. Because also, there's like I was saying, there's so much innovation taking place not only within industries, but at the junctions of those industries. And companies are striving for global, wide-ranging insight. And what's the best way to get global, wide-ranging insight? To have 10 of your friends in all different industries, to have a constant dialogue and information exchange. You are talking to these people at all levels, all times of the day. and making those connections. And the other thing, I mean, in chapter 7, which is my most businessy chapter, I talked to Jackie Zahner, who's wonderful Women Moving Millions. You probably all know her. But Jackie's brother-in-law, yeah, she's a member, right? Jackie connected me with her, again, in another example of how this works, connected me with her brother-in-law, a guy named Rob Cross, who runs, it's called the Global Networking Roundtable. He's a professor at Darden. And he goes into big companies and he maps in a very analytical, data-driven way relationships that drive revenue. And what he said was, he doesn't do gender-specific research, but he said the most successful people have more bridging ties. So as you rise up within an organization, our natural tendency is to rely on the same, so if you're in marketing, but then you're now running marketing in 3 other departments, the natural tendency is to rely on the same 3 people. But in fact, the most successful people actually have tentacles that reach far and wide. They reach out to a much broader group. Those are the skills that are the most valuable in the new economy. These are the skills that women are, without even not in an agenda-based way, these are the skills that women suddenly now have at the same moment in history that they're valuable, at the same moment in history that there are enough women in the room to be useful, at the same moment in history that there are enough women who have money to take risks.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and it is the global economy and the nature of that economy and the nature of sort of establishing competitive advantage and so on suggests a different kind of approach that is perhaps natural to women, as you're saying. So for me, the big sort of question is, so we have your book, and then of course we have Sheryl Sandberg's book, and everyone's nodding their head, that's sort of the elephant in the room. And so part of what I like very much about your book was that what you were talking about was the change and how collaborative and to do it in a different way, in a way that, as you're saying, is natural to us. Without doing a disservice to Sheryl's book and to the complexity of that book and what she's suggesting, there's, from my perspective, the difficult part for me is the notion that what it's basically saying is act like them, in like the crudest, most unfair way, that it's sort of suggesting that women, lean in, not lean in to change the conversation, lean in, I mean, there are parts that, of course, are critical and important, make yourself heard, be present, but there's something about it that's kind of missing the seize it and redefine it. And it's, from my perspective, a little too grounded in accepting it on its terms. So to me, it's kind of, I've thought them very compelling in juxtaposition to one another. So I'm sure you've gotten this question over and over. It's probably the elephant in every room.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was telling Daphne before we sat down that I actually, Facebook was going public as I was finishing my manuscript, and I talked to so many of Sheryl's friends. And this was really funny, but I was like, okay, there's no way I'm going to get to Sheryl because Facebook is going public. So I had it in the back of my head, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if I could get her to write my introduction? And then I found out she was writing her own book. I was like, oh no, this is going to be the worst. But I actually think it's been terrific. I mean, no, because she started the conversation, and I'm grateful because the conversation is continuing. But it's interesting. This was a discovery process for me. I'm a journalist. I wanted to learn and figure out what was happening in the world. I never put this out there as a career guide. So this is, as you said before, it's solidly rooted in narrative. And I'm looking at a formula that has worked in so many different demographics and so many different areas of the country. I found them globally too. And so I do think there is an element in Stiletto Network that, I mean, there's lots that you can learn from these women's stories. But the thing was, my friend Claudia Batten, who's a serial entrepreneur, said something that really moved me. She said, this book is so permissive. There's no single definition of success. And that's what I think was interesting, because what we're really seeing, or what I've seen happen over the last couple of years, is women redefining the workplace, redefining established systems that don't work for them anymore. So the other thing that we're seeing is, women leaving corporate America in droves, but at all levels. So I found that at the sort of senior executive level, where women hit the glass ceiling, they're not going to make it to the C-suite, so they realize they can do it more lucratively and effectively on their own. Moms launching businesses in their basements, women leaving at, high-powered women leaving at 40 saying, you know what, I never see my kids, this really stinks, I'm unhappy. You know why they're doing that? Because their friends are saying, this really stinks, you're unhappy. We want you to be happy. So this isn't a career guide. It's not about getting to the next rung on the ladder. This is actually about how women are redefining the world to make it a place where they can succeed on their own terms. They can be who they are, they can dress how they want, they can be with their friends, they can see their kids. But also, what's fascinating is when you see women succeeding on their own terms, they're not stymied. They're succeeding beyond their wildest dreams, is what I found. With the help of their friends saying, you can do this. We'll invest in you. And we'll do it together. So, I mean, again, I keep saying this isn't, I think Lean In is phenomenal for, there should be a roadmap. There should be a guide for women who want to make it in the corporate environment to the C-suite. But my book is really not that. My book is how to be the best you, how to be the biggest, boldest, bravest version of yourself. And maybe that means starting your own company.